Good afternoon, students. This is Miss Martin, and today we are going to be discussing scientific investigation. How do scientists conduct a scientific investigation? At the end of this video, we're going to talk about observations, inferences, predictions, and you'll be able scenes of scientific investigations. Okay, let's talk about observations. There's two types of observations, a quantitative observation and a qualitative observation. But before we talk about the two types, let's talk about what is an observation. It's a statement about something based on information you gather with one of your five senses. So how many of you remember what your five senses are? Okay, I'll go ahead and review those. Your first one is the sense of smell. You have that wonderful sense of smelling that wonderful food in the cafeteria that we eat for lunch. Your sense of taste is the second one. You can taste food. The third one is touch. You have the opportunity to use your sense of touch when you go to an aquarium and you get to put your hand in the fish tank and pet the stingray. That's touch. The fourth one sense is the sense to see, sight. You can see a lot of things. And then the fifth one is hear. You can hear stuff. So when you're observing stuff, you're going to base an observation as a statement based on information you gather with those five senses that we just went over. So the first type of observation is a quantitative observation. Okay? A quantitative observation involves numbers. For example, there are 30 students in this room. Now, we all know that's a false statement. Observation. The back wall in our So again, your two observations are quantitative, it involves numbers, or qualitative, there's not any numbers. All right, let's practice with a couple of those observations that we just talked about. Identify each of the following as quantitative or qualitative observation. The first example, I feel sick today. So go ahead and use your pencil and write it in if that's a quantitative or a qualitative observation. The second example, I weigh 100 pounds. Is that a qualitative observation or a quantitative observation? And the third example, there are two people in that room. Okay, let's go back and check your work. If you haven't had a chance to fill in these three blanks, go ahead and hit the pause button, and when you get finished, just hit play and we'll pick up at the same spot. Okay, I feel sick today. That's going to be a qualitative observation because that observation does not involve numbers. So that's qualitative. The second one is, I weigh 100 pounds. That one's going to be a quantitative observation because there is a number in that example, 100. So if a number is in the example, which is a quantitative. And the last one, there are 2 people in that room. That's right, quantitative. The number 2, 2 people in the room. So a trick to help you remember the difference, the word quantitative has an N in it, and the N stands for number. And you see the N right here? Remember, N stands for number. And qualitative has an L in it. The L stands for letters, meaning there's letters in the observation. All right, now we're going to talk about inferences. An inference is an example or interpretation about an observation. An inference is an explanation or interpretation about an observation. Okay, an inference differs from an observation in that an inference involves a judgment or guess. There may be more than one logical explanation. For example, Jim's eyes are bloodshot, meaning his eyes are bright red. So that would be an observation. We can observe that Jim's eyes are red. Now, would that be a qualitative or a quantitative observation? That's right. It would be a qualitative observation. And remember, there's an L in qualitative, and that means letters, okay? The last one, let's look at this last inference. Jim must have stayed up late last night, okay? That's an inference because that's an explanation or a guess. We don't know that's true or not. That's just our judgment. We're thinking his eyes are bloodshot because he stayed up late last night. We don't know that. Maybe his eyes are bloodshot because he has red contact lenses in. We don't know. That's why it's an inference. Okay, now this is your turn. Try to identify each of the following as an observation or an inference. The car was probably in a wreck. There is a dent in the car's fender. All right. The car was probably in a wreck. That is going to be an inference. We don't know if it was in a wreck. That's a judgment that we're using. We have no clue if that's true. That's our guess. There is a dent in the car's fender. That's right, that's an observation. That is something that we can observe on the car. And that would be what type of observation? Qualitative, that's right. There's not any numbers in that statement. Now, if I said there are 2 dents in the car's fender, that would make that observation a quantitative because there was a number 2 involved. So a trick to help you remember the difference, the word inference has an F in it. The F stands for figure it out, okay? So remember that the F stands for figure it out. Predictions. A prediction is an inference about the future. We don't know what happened to the animal. We're just guessing that it had been hit by a car. And the last statement, that animal will smell bad tomorrow. That's a prediction. That's an inference about the future. We don't know that it's going to smell bad tomorrow, but we're inferring that it will because based on what we know, that when animals are dead and they lie on the ground, they start to smell the next day. That's why we would call it a prediction. Types of variables. Whenever you conduct an experiment, you have to deal with variables, things that can change. There's 3 types of variables in an experiment. The first one is manipulated variable. The second type of variable is a responding variable. And the third type of variable is a controlled variable. So the 3 types of variables in an experiment. So let's talk about them. The manipulated variable is the thing that you change on purpose in an experiment, okay? The responding variable is the thing you observe or measure in an experiment. And the controlled variable are the things that you keep the same in an experiment. All right, let's take an example experiment. Bill wanted to see sunflowers grow best in sunlight or artificial light. He put one plant near in the classroom window, and then he put a plant in our little closet. And so he's going to measure the height of each next week. In this experiment, let's talk about the variables. The manipulated variable, okay, that's going to be the type of light. He was able to manipulate the light by either using it in the window or having window or no light that was in the closet. Okay, that's something that you can change. For example, you can manipulate people depending on what you do. Think about it that way. Responding variable was the height of plant. That's how it responded to the type of changes. And the controlled variable was the soil, water, pot, and temperature. That's the things that we could control. Okay, so we've gone over a lot of information today. Let's go back and review. I'm going to stop right here for now for variables. I think we've received a lot of information today, and I want to go back and review briefly what we've talked about. We've talked about scientific investigation and observations. We have 2 types of observations, a quantitative observation and a qualitative observation. Quantitative involves numbers. Qualitative involves letters. And then we've talked about inferences, which is an explanation or interpretation about an observation. We talked about eyes. Jim's eyes are bloodshot. We observed that, and then we inferred that he stayed up late. And we remembered to remember the difference. The word inference has an F in it. The F stands for figure it out. You've got to figure out what happened. It's kind of like a detective. We talked about predictions. A prediction is an inference about the future. So you're having to figure out what's going to happen in the future. You're going to have to make a prediction. And then finally, we have talked about 3 types of variables: manipulated variable, responding variable, and controlled variables. And we said a manipulated variable is the thing that you change on purpose. So in our example, Bill put one plant in the window and one plant in the closet. He was manipulating the sunlight. The responding variable is the thing you observe or measure. So he was measuring the growth of the plant, and the controlled variables are the things that you keep the same. And in that example, he was keeping the soil the same, the water, the pot, and the temperature. Okay, so that's it for today. It's my famous 15-minute promise. Every lesson is 15 minutes or less, and I've got like 15 seconds to go. So anyways, hope you have a great day, and we will talk soon. This is the end of part 1 of scientific investigations.